Yo, what is good, Vibers? I hope you are all well. I'm having a pretty surreal day today because it is my birthday and we are also in the client. So that's crazy. Big shout out to Theorycraft for giving us the opportunity. And I just wanted to take a second to give a huge shout out to you guys because you're the reason we're there. And so I really appreciate all you guys watching and all the support for the few months we've been rolling with the SUPERVIVE channel. And I plan to do my best to continue that moving forward. So just want to give a heartfelt thank you to you guys. Thank you so much. And yeah, so continuing with that mission here, we are going to be going over the giant amount of patch notes that just hit yesterday. My goal for this video is to quickly give you a broad understanding of everything that's changed in the patch notes as quickly as I can at the beginning here, so you know kind of what's happening. And then I'm going to discuss each change in detail and show some stuff in practice tool if it's relevant to hopefully help you understand not just what changed, but also what that means for gameplay. All that will be timestamped, so after this first part, once you're kind of caught up on what's going on, you can sort of jump to any section you want more details on and see what's up. We're going to be taking a look at the patch notes through the eyes of Din's app here, so if you're looking for a sort of cleaner way to view your patch notes, shout out to Din for putting this really clean thing together. We even have this menu over on the right now, and so you can kind of search what you're looking for in the patch notes. I will link this in the description. So diving right in, probably the coolest thing that hit with this patch is the new Hunter Crysta, and I played her a bunch yesterday. She is super fun. I'm not going to go into really any details on her because I did a beginner's guide on her yesterday. So if you're looking for more details on Crysta and how to play her, I will link that in the description as well. All right, let's dive into a quick overview and try to get a good understanding of everything that's happening. You can see this is titled Must Read Patch Notes because there are so many changes here. They're saying it's the largest patch they've shipped ever, and for good reason, and there's just kind of a massive amount of changes coming in this patch, and a huge part of that is to the strategic structure of SUPERVIVE. So we can see gold matters, mobility adjustments to hunters, some social stuff with Discord and pings added. And so sort of the overarching theme here is they're not only trying to add like more of a structured strategy level to the game, they're also trying to make that like a little clearer, like not so sort of disparate. And a big change that's coming with this patch is sort of using gold as the primary like metric of power. And so you'll see in game now, you not only have your damage score at the top right, you're also going to be able to see your gold score. And that's sort of this new number that's a combination of gold earned and gold spent, another kind of metric to gain power. But, you know, before you were picking up power shards from creeps, all that's now converted into gold. You're still going to get the big power shards from players. And there's also huge changes to XP. So the farming meta that's been happening the last couple weeks is drastically shifted up now because you get XP on knocks instead of kills. So if you put someone in the wisp state, that's when you get the XP. And the XP for PvP has been increased substantially across the board. So if we come down here, they've put together their own kind of summary, and I'll read through this as we jump through these different sections. So you upgrade your equipment via gold at base camps, boat shops, and wandering shopkeepers. So no more global shop. You're going to find wandering shopkeepers across the map, the normal boat shops, and now base camps. Instead of cooking, you can now buy at that same little spot in the top left of a base camp. Like your normal weapons that you kind of get, like your Tech Blade, Mana Blade that you're normally upgrading from the little shards that come from creeps, you're going to need to buy that now. So one of the biggest things you're going to realize as you get into game, if you haven't played on this patch yet, is that you're not automatically going to be getting your weapons and having them upgrade. You have to actually go out of your way, get to a shop, buy those first initial ones for 200, you know, buy your Tech Blade, Mana Blade, and then you can upgrade, you know, to green for 400, blue for 1,000. You're still going to get your like RNG evolution at blue, but basically like you're going to be accumulating gold, which is now the new metric for power throughout the game, but you have to actually go to a shop and spend it to realize that power. So like after my whole day playing yesterday, one of the biggest mistakes I saw and one of the like hardest things to get used to is that you're not getting your power immediately anymore. Obviously, if you're looting like an enemy death box or something like that, you can. But as you're getting gold from PvE and PvP, you need to be now spending that in shops on your equipment to realize that power. And it's important to do that because you're now going to drop half of your gold on death. So basically, you want to get to a shop and spend that, especially if you have a significant amount, in case you do end up going down. Along with that change and kind of this strategic adjustment, they want you to be able to play around specific powers more reliably. And so now powers below exotic are soulbound. So if you kill an enemy hunter, you're not going to be able to just snatch their powers out of their death box like you used to be able to unless you squad wipe. So you can still take enemies' powers if you wipe their whole squad, but you're not just going to be able to, like, you know, see someone with glider gas, kill them, and instantly take the glider gas. You're going to need to get the full squad wipe and pull the glider gas out of that team box. Like we mentioned, we also have the new Hunter Crysta. We're not going to really cover her because I made a whole video on it yesterday, so you can check that out if you're looking for more intel on her. But she is super cool, super fun, super strong. So definitely a fun hunter to be checking out. They're doing a huge integration with Discord, so now we're actually going to have like in-game chat, so you can like whisper people and stuff. There's also some integration stuff with Discord friends, some pretty cool things. There's going to be new ranked party restrictions, so you can see these brackets right here. You're not going to be able to queue too far apart in the ranked window. Like if someone's bronze, you're not going to be able to queue with someone that's diamond. So it's basically 3 full ranks, and it kind of skips silver. So if you want to play with someone that's in diamond, you got to get to gold. If you want to play with someone that's in master, you got to get to plat. And if you want to play with someone that's in grandmaster, you got to get to diamond. And so they're trying to sort of reel in the disparate groups in the ranking system, like not having a grandmaster get grouped with a bronze, for example. We look at these system changes. This is the huge thing we're talking about with gold. We're going to go through that more in depth, and also gold dropping on death. We have these huge XP changes. So if you missed the patch 2 weeks ago, that's when they removed the level cap. So the new level cap's now 15. Beyond that, there's even more XP changes where now level 1 through 3 is quicker. So you're going to be able to unlock your kit more fully, but it's still going to take a decent amount of time to get to your ultimate, which is now 7. Right, so now every skill rank has 4 ranks instead of 3. You can still only get one of these maxed ranked at 4 unless you get XP Soul, and you're now going to get your first rank of your ultimate at 7. So a little bit of the new meta is like when you drop in, you can get some good PvE farming in and get to 7 before you fight. But now the other thing that comes along with these XP changes is that PvP knocks are going to grant a full level no matter what level you are before level 3. So, and then the XP for knocking enemies in general has been increased. And like I mentioned, you now get XP on the knock itself instead of having to like go put them in a death box. Like we mentioned, the powers are soulbound for now, trying to work on that kind of strategic depth and being able to like actually make a build around a power and use that reliably. Some changes to monster staggering, which is that little circle under them. It's going to be easier. It's going to happen more often. The drop speed of pods increase, and especially if you break off in your solo pod, you're going to be able to like travel further distance-wise. Along with the level increase and there being more levels, sort of like more resolution to your journey, they added 2 levels for LMB now. So you're going to zone in, you're going to drop in with LMB at level 1. In general, upgrading LMB for most hunters is just going to do this increase to AP ratio, right? Mobility, balance, and use. So this is the whole section on hunter changes. There's a lot here, and I'm just gonna go through it super quick right now, but we're gonna go through each of these in depth with each hunter. So if you're interested in any of these, you can check out the timestamp for like more details, but there's a lot of changes here. So a lot of it is around mobility, and you see them mentioning in this first paragraph talking about trying to have the like windows or moments where you or your opponent can see what the other is doing and have at least some opportunity to outplay. They're like not there a lot of the times. There are sort of too many mobility things in play right now where that window doesn't exist in a lot of situations. Like the engage or whatever the situation is can happen so fast that there's like not a window to react because of how stacked this stuff kind of is. And I know some of the more experienced players might be a little bummed about this if you spend a lot of time really dialing like in your like oath b-hopping with the LMB glide or like your brawlish movement. Some of those things are going to get chopped down a little bit, and I'm not gonna lie, it does feel bad if you're an experienced player. It makes the hunters feel more clunky, but the intent is that they're trying to get the game to a state where these hunters aren't so oppressive that they cause people to quit, right? And so we want fun hunters. Yes, we want mobility. Just like you guys, I love the mobility on those hunters just as much as you guys do. You know, but sometimes we have to consider like the whole picture and like, is that too much and is that healthy for the game? So really brief overview. Bishop got a really nice buff. She's in a really strong spot right now. Saw a lot of Bishop yesterday. Brall got hit real hard again. I still see him out there. He can still blast you, but he got, you know, really massive kind of nerfs to his mobility here. One of the biggest ones being not be able to glide after your shift. You're sort of locked out of that normal movement. Like most hunters, you know, new hunter, you can sort of carry the momentum from your shift into your glide, and Brall was one of the best ones at being able to do that with the dash shift. He can no longer do that. Ghost got a little touch with a new level 4 upgrade to his combat slide, his shift, which he doesn't need at all, and I'll show you the details of that when we go over Ghost. Kingpin got a nerf that's going to make him feel a little more clunky. You're basically not going to be able to steer your Q as much when you do your shift Q in for a big slam. Also a halving on the attack speed reset of the level 4 upgrade on the shift. And then there's some adjustments to Jin. The LMB damage got taken down by 20%, but the Q damage got taken up, but only in the kind of above execute range. So compared to before, it's going to basically do more damage to someone who's above 60% health, less damage by about 5% to someone who's below 60% health based on these numbers adjustments here. And then also a cooldown increase, slight cooldown increase on the ult. Joule, I got a couple Joule friends that are a little bummed about this, but basically you cannot instantly combo your orb from your lightning spear anymore. There's basically a half-second delay on you being able to grab your spear because they, again, talking about these reaction windows and trying to give players a fair battlefield to where they can actually see and have at least a millisecond to react to stuff. The Joule combo they're saying here basically happens so fast that it's almost kind of undodgeable, unavoidable. So they're trying to add at least some amount of ability to outplay that RMB insta spear dash dash combo that Joule can do. Oath, I'm so sorry, my Oath players, the hyper speed of the Bhop LMB swoosh movement is gone, sadly. So RIP to that. Still a super fun hunter, but I knew a lot of Oaths that were really loving that movement tech. But on a hunter like this, who was already extremely powerful, that kind of just, you know, took him to a level that was maybe a bit unfair, where not only can he do literally everything in the game, he can also now move faster than everyone as well. And so, you know, one of those kind of hard to swallow, but possibly necessary adjustments for overall balance. Shrike got some nice little buffs. I think that's pretty cool because, like, once you get kind of out of the lower elo, you see very little Shrike. And so I'm pretty happy about this, like some pretty cool changes to her. And then finally, this little adjustment to Void where it's basically your LMB, like, you know, how if you wait a second and you can get the bigger orb, now it's basically going to do the same amount of damage no matter how long you wait, whereas it was kind of like a scale before. Coming down to consumables, we got a bunch of new stuff and gold adjustments due to the big changes that are happening with the gold system and the kind of overall strategic layer. So we can see all that stuff here. Some new stuff, Elixir of Health, Mana Speed. You can buy Most Wanted now. New thing called Ultravive, which not only does health and mana, but also does like armor and like cooldowns maybe. There's something else. Ultravive basically does like everything. And then deployable base, respawn beacon. Coming down to power changes, you can now see Invis with Abyssal Eye, Blinkstone cooldown increase, Delicate Barrier, linger duration on that damage reduction doubled, but the damage reduction lowered. Scan grenades can now be picked up, so that's kind of cool. You can like go pick up your wards if you interact with them again, kind of like Shrike Bird or like Bebo Bomb. There's some nice map adjustments. Like I really love the way Ion Acres looks now. There's like some actual like kind of character and personality to the brushes. It's more of like a little, you know, garden, Skylands garden. I've had some really spicy fights in there. We've also had some really spicy fights in the new area Fortress, which is like mid left on the map. So if you haven't been there yet, find a good reason to drop Fortress and make your way over across like Chaos Steps. It is a really cool new design over there. Some client changes. If you're in queue, you can now instantly go into practice. They added the ability in custom games to remove resurgence, and then they updated the tutorial. They also added a couple new pings to enhance the rich ping system, so you can now say fight group up and help on the ping wheel. I'm still waiting for when they add the ability to mute pings, because sometimes teammates just ping way too much, and they're not pinging the right things and sort of leading everyone the wrong way. But this is super cool. You can now, just like in other games, like if you hit any of your function keys, you can instantly, not instantly, there's a slight cooldown to it, but you can see your teammates only while you're alive. So you can't, this function doesn't work if you're dead, but if you're alive, you can basically hit F2, F3, F4, and it will like take a second, then pan to your teammates. So you can actually get some intel on what they're doing, see if they're, you know, in a winnable fight, if they're trolling you, you know, you can actually kind of see now what's going on. So I really like this. And we can see this last point, it'll actually try to show their death box if they're dead. So if you don't know where someone's death box is, that's a really good way to try to find it without having to like say, where's your death box? And then have them ping it and then try to, you know, find it on the map. Hopefully now if you use this function key for whichever number they are, it'll actually go to their death box. Some small VO updates. The announcer will now tell you when there's 3 and 4 squads left instead of just like 5 in the final. And then they increase like the cooldown of hunters saying their VO across the board. So it's going to feel like a little less spammy of firing down range. Oh yeah, an experimental controller support. I forgot about this. I literally got a Turtle Beach like a couple months ago for action RPG stuff, and so I'm actually gonna test this out later and maybe do a video on this, or at least like hopefully show you guys what's up. If you want to see, I actually saw Lemur last night. Was I didn't get to tune in, but he was controller testing on his stream. So check out Lemur's stream if you want to see some controller testing live. He might be messing with it some more. They did some really nice updates to the mission hub, and then they have some nice bug fixes in QOL. So that's kind of like an overview of everything that's happened. I know that overview was like a lot, and so now we're going to talk through everything in like a bit more detail. If there's more to understand about a topic, I'm going to try to show you guys what's up in the practice tool. The first big chunk here is the new Hunter Crysta. You're going to be able to find out everything you need to know about her in my beginner's guide if you're looking to get started on her. That's linked in the description, so check that out if you're interested in Crysta. Taking a more in-depth look at the Discord integration. So what they say is, we believe SUPERVIVE is best played with friends, and so we're partnering, which is true. It's also fun solo queue, but it's fun with friends. We're partnering with Discord in order to make that easier for everyone. SUPERVIVE accounts can now be linked with Discord. So when you log into game, you're going to see in the bottom right of that menu we were at the start of the video, just the main menu, you're going to see the big Discord integration button. If you click on that guy, it's going to, lead you into your Discord account, and you can link everything. But basically, we finally have like a whisper system where if you want to like actually message another player and stuff like that, all that's going to work now, but it's going to be through this sort of like Discord integration instead of them having to design that system themselves. And I was going to show you what that looks like, but it's making me log into Discord, and I can't remember my Discord login because I just am always logged in. And so you'll find out when you look at it. It should be good. And if you want to like give even more information, you can display a rich social presence. I think it's in like the Discord options. And then again, you can always unlink this at any time if you're not liking it. Coming down to the ranked party restrictions, I'm just going to read this little paragraph to you. In the Bhop patch, we changed matchmaking and rank to be based on a combination of both rank and your MMR. This has improved matches and ensured the players are being matched more consistently with people of similar ranks. Historically, we've let Grandmaster players party with bronze players, which, as you can imagine, can make matchmaking itself fairly difficult. You can continue to party with friends in normal games with no restrictions. However, when it comes to ranked and gaining RP, there are now going to be limits on how far apart ranks can be within a party. So this is the full breakdown of what that split kind of looks like. So if you're bronze, you can queue with anyone up to platinum or lower. And then if you want to queue with someone that's in diamond, here, let's pull up if you didn't know this, if you're looking for more information on the ranked system, when you put it on ranked squads here, if you click on this guy, it'll bring up this window, and this gives you like basically the details of how the ranked system works, right? So if we're looking at, kind of where these windows are from platinum to bronze, so this chunk you can play together. So if your friend's here and you're just starting out in bronze, you can play together. As soon as you're in diamond, you're only going to be able to queue with people that are gold, right? So it's going to jump kind of bronze and silver are almost like in the same category here. And then from there, it's going to be basically 3 ranks apart. So we can see diamond can queue with gold. So you can basically queue in this chunk here. Master can queue with platinum. So, one more chunk up, still kind of 3 ranks apart right here. And then Grandmaster Plus can queue with diamond and up. So again, we kind of have, moving up in like kind of windows of 3 ranks apart. And again, this is sort of in an attempt to improve the matchmaking system as a whole. All right, now coming down to this super massive section on system changes, I tried to give you a good overview of this at the beginning so you can kind of understand the general idea. Now we're going to talk through it a little more in detail, right? So I'm just going to read this first section to you. A major theme of the feedback we've heard from players across all skill bands, especially new ones, is that the early game of SUPERVIVE is really free-flowing, which results in an experience where it's hard to know, am I doing the right things? Am I playing optimally or not? The changes we made to the leveling structure, removing daily level caps, was the first step. We're continuing on that path to both simplify our various progression bars in the game, as well as having 2 key measuring sticks of power, levels, and gold earned. So, like I kind of mentioned at the beginning, the intent of this change is to make they want to define the strategic layer of SUPERVIVE a little better, and they want to make it a little more clear and give the player a little more intel on where they're at in that strategic kind of journey game to game, right? So giving you the tools to kind of know where is my power level at versus where I'm at in the game at any given time. And part of the plan to do that is sort of simplify the total amount of things that exist for you to keep track of without losing any sort of strategic depth, perhaps even gaining some with the right changes. So now let's look at each of these changes individually, but just kind of keep that in mind as the overarching goal of what's going on here. So you can now upgrade your equipment at shops with gold. So when I was playing yesterday, like one of the most, like I mentioned at the beginning, obvious, like visceral things that's happening here is you are no longer going to be just like automatically upgrading you know, you pick up your Mana Blade, Quick Blade at the beginning, right? That's not even going to happen. Like, see how I just did that? You're not going to be able to do that until you get to a shop and spend 200 gold. And you can find a shop at a base camp here. It doesn't work at Practice Tool, but this, where you used to cook your beans, there's no longer Vive beans. And the other thing that you're going to feel right away is consumables like pots are a lot harder to get. And so you're going to have to always basically buy your pots. There's a few creeps that are going to drop them, like the little boomer birds, and like the bulls or the boars will drop some health pots. But in general, you're now going to have to, for 100 gold a piece, basically buy your Vive brew, your 3 Vive brew at the shop. So gold and shops are now much higher in priority, and you're going to basically have to get to a shop to realize the power from all the gold you've gained. Monsters mostly drop gold. Now, this is refreshing because you no longer have to like go to where the monster's body was to loot the power shard, which are sometimes even bugged, and you have to run right on top of them to actually scoop the power shard. You don't have to worry about scooping those little power shards anymore. You're still going to see there's still the big juicy power shards for killing players that'll give you the full rank up. But you're not going to see the little ones from creeps anymore. You're just going to like auto get the gold if you participated in that kill. I like that change. It kind of like speeds things up and is less, and you don't have to like worry about like going back and like looting areas you missed and stuff like that. And something not obvious in these patch notes that you're really going to want to keep in mind with this is like, let's say you have, you know, a couple thousand gold and you haven't upgraded anything yet. And you have a couple power shards from PvP, right? Let's say you got in a scrap, you won, you come away with that with 2 power shards and like 3k gold, and you haven't upgraded anything, right? In that scenario, you don't want to use your big juicy power shards on that 200 gold first upgrade, which it's going to show you the little upgrade thing, and it's going to want you to do that. Like anytime you have a power shard in game, it's going to show you, you know, that little plus icon. Instead of doing that, you want to go spend 200 gold at a fire first, because you want to use that shard for like the blue to purple jump or the purple to orange jump instead of from the white to green jump. You know what I'm saying? Because that jump from, you know, to upgrade from blue to purple is 2,000 gold, and to upgrade from white to green is 200 gold. And that same shard is going to do both of those. So basically what you want to do is spend your gold first and then use your power shards. If you come away from a winning fight and you haven't upgraded yet, go, you know, upgrade as much as you can. If you have 3k gold, you know, maybe you take one of your weapons to blue, the other one to green, and then this sort of remains true, right? Where if I have 2 shards and I have 1 blue weapon and 1 green weapon, the highest kind of value I'm going to get out of those shards, because the kind of price of the power level jump keeps increasing, is to put them both into my blue weapon, right? Even though I might want the evolution on my other one, it's going to be, and it might be the case to do that sometimes, right? Like maybe you just spend 1 to get the blue if you're not expecting to come into, you know, another 1,000 gold soon. But basically, if you think you're going to be alive enough to get another 1,000 gold, those shards are going to be more efficient if you put them both into your highest upgraded item that's already been upgraded with the gold, because now the first shard's worth 2,000 gold because you're jumping from, you know, blue to purple, and then I think the next jump is like 3,000 or 4,000 gold. So your second shard jumping from purple to orange is going to be worth like 3,000 or 4,000 gold. Now you've just realized like 6,000 worth of gold in 2 power shards instead of 600 worth of gold if you had spent those same 2 power shards leveling up white to green, right? Whoa, that was trippy. Getting back to the rest of these, all purple chests now contain dropped gold along with other stuff. You can now shop at base camps, boat shops, or wandering shopkeepers. So there's now, along with the normal boat shops that are there, you can shop at the base camps like we talked about. You're also going to find wandering shopkeepers across the map. The anywhere shop, like the global shop with V, is now gone. That was a short-lived thing. It's only been in for like a month or so anyways. Cooking is also gone, like we mentioned. The spot where you cook on a fire is now a shop. And you're no longer going to find just like raw beans laying around everywhere. The potions are going to be a little more rare, and you're going to actually have to like buy them. So anytime you're by a shop, if you're not full on pots, make sure to scoop a couple pots, maybe grab like a hypervibe if you got, you know, some extra gold. And it says that right here, you must purchase consumables, vibe brew, etc. at shops or looted from enemy death boxes. So that's the other way you can get it, obviously, is, you know, looting enemies. And we mentioned gold score a little bit. This is basically a combination of held gold and spent gold. And this has been added to the UI in the top right next to damage on the leaderboard next to held gold. It says you can use this score to roughly calibrate enemy strength in terms of what they've purchased for upgrades or compare farm rates with the rest of your team. Now, I'm not sure exactly where you see your enemy's gold score, because you can see your own in the top right, so I'm not sure exactly what that sentence is referencing. Various parts of the economy have been tuned for this new gold world, including shop costs and how much gold monsters give. So all monsters except biome bosses have had their XP and gold rewards significantly increased to make, more gold present in the game, with it being kind of the new power metric. So XP increased by about 2.5, and gold rewards increased from 600 gold to always giving 2,000 gold for every nearby ally. After the last night of the game, when it kind of gets into end game, if there aren't any shopkeepers like in the circle, one will be spawned at random and dropped onto the map after a short duration. At this point in the game, if there's no kind of like boat shop in that final circle positioning, the main source of shops is going to be campfires, bonfires. So going to be more important than ever to have someone on your team be like packing up a bonfire and carrying that mobile bonfire with them to be redeployed and shopped at when needed. And if you don't have a base camp, basically your only options for shopping are finding, a normal boat shop or coming across one of those wandering shopkeepers. And along with all this gold stuff, they're basically adding more consequence to deaths. And so a criticism of the day one revival rules is that there's no early game consequence, which is valid. Trying to address that, when you die, you lose half of your gold. So this new kind of power metric that determines how strong your character is, it's going to be very punishing if you die with a significant amount of that, which is more and more reason to be consistently, especially early on, looking for shops and places to invest your gold into your gear ASAP. Continuing with system changes, after gold, they have these XP changes, and they say one of the biggest pain points they've heard from the leveling changes is that it can take forever to get your kit unlocked. Part of what they liked about adding additional levels is the more space between the kit getting unlocked and the breakpoint where you sort of unlock your ultimate. And so they've basically shifted XP a little bit, where it's easier to get 1, 2, and 3, so you can like get your 3 abilities and turn your hunter into like a real hunter. If you're like a Zeph or a Kingpin, you kind of need level 3 to really be a hunter. And that XP has basically been moved to like 4, 5, and 6, so it's going to take roughly the same time to get your ultimate at 7, which, something else important to keep in mind is the new ult level is 7. That's kind of the big power spike early game, where if you're able to get 7 off of PvE or PvP, that you're going to be kind of ahead of the curve with your ultimates. That's a really good time to look to fight and kind of increase that advantage through more PvP kills. The other thing here is that the XP for knocking enemies in PvP has been increased across the board, whether they're higher level, same level, or lower level. PvP knocks will now grant a full level no matter what if you're not level 3 yet. So those spicy level 1 fights, before you even take out a single creep, you can actually get level 3 very quickly if you're able to secure 2 knocks like back to back. This is an interesting one. Opening boxes and vaults now give XP, which scales up with the phases of the game. So vaults are now going to be rewarded not only with the loot inside, but also with this extra XP bonus. And here's just the actual number adjustment on the leveling kind of distribution we were talking about up here. Continuing with system changes, taking a look at Soulbound powers. Basically, now any power below exotic, you're going to keep it when you die. Basically, the only time you're not going to keep it is if your team gets squad wiped or if it's an exotic, right? And so the intent here is basically they want players to start not only using powers more, but also be able to sort of make a build, like, build a strategy around a certain power and not have to worry about, instantly losing that and that whole strategy going to waste, especially if you are building your kind of items and stuff in that direction as well, just for like a single death. And so because you're dropping half your gold on death, and that's such like a kind of, big amount of power lost, they're kind of pulling back the powers thing to where you can actually keep the powers you're building and potentially use them as more of an integral part of like your build or your kit or your play style without having to worry about that instantly going away the very first time you die. Some interesting changes to monster staggering. I like this. This feels pretty good. Basically, they made them stagger more, and they made the stagger window bigger. So this is basically anytime you're creeping, you always want to look out for this. On the big creep, there's going to be a circle that shows up under him. And you basically are going to have a certain amount of time to use. It doesn't have to be necessarily a crowd controlling ability, but most hunters' abilities will basically proc that circle, and every hunter has one ability that will instantly reset his cooldown if you hit that circle with it. So for example, like on Brall, it's his shift. On Ghost, it's his sticky grenade. Like on these hunters, if you hit a staggered creep with that ability, not only will it proc the stagger, it will instantly reset the cooldown of that ability. And so for these monsters, the stagger window has been increased, and they're going to have that stagger window more often, but the stagger damage itself has been lowered. But in general, this is going to make PvE like a little faster paced, a little more interesting, a little easier and more reliable to constantly be getting those staggers without having to worry about you know, your stuff being on cooldown or being super impatient, just sitting there for 10 seconds, like waiting for the stagger. Like it's kind of just like more fluid now. I think this is a good change. Pod drop speed increased, especially for solo pods. So basically, they say in a world where split gold farming is more valuable, we've seen the desire for teams to split up even more in early game. These changes allow solo pods to break off and move further away from the main team pod faster. So the drop speed of the team's pod has been increased, being able to like move, you know, left and right. And then the solo pod has been increased significantly more than that. And so if you break off from your squad leader, you can get a significant kind of distance, you know, in any given direction from where that main pod came down. And they made the detach time faster as well. And as we come down to hunters, there's kind of this change that's somewhere in between system changes and hunter changes. And this is the addition of 2 levels to your LMB now. So we can see, like, if you're, you know, as soon as you start leveling up, you're now going to be able to upgrade your LMB as well. And so depending on your hunter, like especially for hunters that rely heavily on their LMB, let's think about a myth or a shiv or a shrike, right? What I've been doing basically, and what I think is like can be a good strategy and feels fairly good, is basically, you know, you do your normal 1, 2, 3, so you have your 3 abilities, and then for 4 and 5 you max your LMB. And I don't think that's necessarily going to be true on all hunters, but basically if you're playing a hunter that relies heavily on LMB for damage, I think, you know, getting those early levels in the LMB is going to make a big difference. Like we can see, this is just 20% flat damage increase, like really strong actually, especially when you consider how much of Myth's DPS is coming from just her LMB arrows. All right, now coming down to this super massive hunter balance section, I'm going to kind of read this first part to you because they're basically giving their logic behind why they're doing what they're doing. And they know that a couple of these changes are going to make especially the sort of the movement on experienced players on some of these hunters more clunky. But basically, they were not anticipating the amount of excess mobility this kind of movement tech was going to give, and how kind of aggressively that disrupts the balance of the game, to where other players literally don't have a window to react to certain plays because of the overwhelming amount of kind of movement and mobility that are in some of these kits, right? So we like that our action combat feels visceral and fast, but want to address cases that make you or your target feel out of control. These changes are targeted at making combat more predictable, knowable, and reactable by adding windowing, meaning clear windows or moments where you or your opponent can see the next step in combat flow and micro adjust rather than just slamming out abilities. Also, to call out the addition of wind down frames on Oath and Brawl. We know that having mechanical optimizations for hypermobility is cool, but it creates an arm race where we either have to buff the entire roster to match that level of speed and fluidity, and they're saying they're already seeing like unreactable engagements where literally all this stuff stacked, like something happens so fast that there's, you know, literally like no time for an opponent to actually react, which if you think about it isn't really a balanced game state. And you know, if you're not getting to experience a fight, if you're not getting a chance to react and the game is just over, that's not a fun game. And so they're choosing basically to throttle back some of this excess mobility and go from there. Not saying it's going to be gone forever, but basically this is the first step toward trying to find some parity. All these changes are listed in the hunter changes we're about to go through, but these are all the things that are specific to mobility. So if you're interested in like what got changed kind of like movement mobility wise, this is kind of everything in one spot. So Joule's Voltaic Spear, the RMB that if you connect it, it makes the lightning orb. If you dash through the lightning orb, you get the instant reset on the shift without having to go through like a stacked target, right? Now there's going to be a brief delay on that. So you can't basically, before you could sort of RMB, and if you knew you were going to connect that RMB, you could like LMB shift cancel and just instantly shift through that orb and get that instant reset, like, and then shift again before the enemy player even sees the orb or has a chance to react at all, right? And they say that here, basically getting a free unreactable dash reset. Again, guys, don't get mad at me if you're a Joule player. I'm not the one making these changes. I'm not even saying I agree with them. I'm just trying to relay the logic here, right? You know, if you main one of these hunters, you're probably not that happy, and it's understandable. Joule's R also had the cast time increase, and now it's going to have a landing indicator, which is like super useful if you're playing against Joule, because you had literally no idea where she was going to be going before. Kingpin's level 4 dash is now going to be less effective at resetting his LMB. It's actually going to be halved from 100% down to 50% on that reset. So he can't do that instant kind of crazy mow down combo with the LMB like insta reset. This one's kind of big. When Brawl and Kingpin cast their big wind-up ability, Brawl's RMB or Kingpin's Q, and then immediately dash to negate the cast time of that ability, they are now restricted in how much they can turn aim the ability. So I believe that's called the yaw. There's now a yaw restriction. If you're like Kingpin going for that dash slam or Brawl going for the RMB, like you're basically going to have, you're not going to be able to like, you know, swing all the way around and slam behind you. There's some restriction on the amount you can turn once you've committed to that dash. Brawl's Tether Strike, his Q got hit really hard. Impulse Force has been decreased. Cooldown has been increased. Level 4 upgrade now runs less cooldown when an enemy is hit. Additionally, the Tether now breaks if Brawl is stunned and cannot be activated if Brawl is rooted or grounded. I think those last two maybe should have been in there from the beginning, but the Tether itself, getting so many kind of reductions stacked with that stuff is going to hurt the Brawl Tether play. And this one got mentioned. Oath and Brawl now have wind down frames on certain movement abilities. So this is like the Oath, LMB, Glide, Bhop we've been seeing a lot of people do. Like this is pod racing, and like Dunmere, probably some of the best guys I've seen doing that LMB movement with Oath. That's no longer going to be available because of sort of the hyper mobility it was giving him on top of everything else that made his kit really strong. And then finally, Bishop's Blast Off her R now has a cast time wind up and has had its velocity decreased. All right, now let's get into the details of the Hunter changes, starting with Bishop. So, empowered LMB increased damage and explosion radius. RMB level 4 upgrade changed, Q level 4 upgrade changed, and R initial cast time increased and velocity decreased. So what this is, we're hearing a lot of feedback that Bishop's talents don't have a lot of diversity, so we're adjusting the other options to be more attractive and giving her a general buff. Regarding the ultimate change, we like biasing her ult usage more toward offensive engages and less defensive get out of jail use. So now on RJ, when you get your empowered shot, which is when you hit your rocket, see how I get this extended range and it's a bigger rocket? It's basically slightly longer range and slightly more powerful version, and you have a bigger explosion radius. So that got buffed with this first change. We have 20% increased damage on that purple this guy, and the explosion radius is also 10% bigger. We now have an RMB upgrade if we look at it here, where it's minus 5 seconds off the cooldown, and it increases the explosion radius and impulse scale. So what they mean by impulse is basically how far stuff is going to get launched from like the momentum of it. So basically, if you upgrade this, you're going to get, we can see by default it's a 10-second cooldown. Upgrading it to 4 is going to give you half of that. So you're going to be able to literally do it double as often, like twice as much, right? But then on top of that, it's going to have a bigger pop right there. And it's also going to like not only send you farther, it's going to send enemies farther. Like this effect, that momentum right there, is going to be some amount increased with the level 4. You got to go all the way out of the practice tool to change these things, but for you guys, I will do it. So we saw right there that if we do upgrade this RMB, we have a much bigger radius actually, and this impulse is going to be bigger. Whoops, this. Yeah, look actually how much farther we can go off of that, right? So it's actually a pretty cool upgrade now. It's quite a bit bigger, and you're going to be able to get quite a bit more bump out of it, to where you can kind of load it into your, you know, trajectory. The level 4 Q upgrade now gives a shield for hitting multiple targets up to 2 and reduces the cooldown by 1 second for each target hit. So if we look at the punch, level 4 here, grants max HP shield on a hit that can stack twice. Cooldown is reduced by 1 second if any target is hit. All right, so if we go ahead and grab this upgrade, we can see we get this shield, and it's going to be based on max HP. So basically, the more you're building into health with RJ, like, or with Bishop, like the more, if you're building especially like more tanky, like something like, you know, Helm of Gigantism and Scholar or something like that, this max HP shield is going to go a lot further. So I would honestly recommend really only doing the Q upgrade if you're planning to build somewhat tanky, because the more health you have, the more value you're going to get out of this percentage shield that's based off your max HP, right? And then finally, looking at the ult, the initial cast time has been increased by 0.2 seconds from 0.3 to 0.5, and the velocity decreased by 250 from 2,500 to 2,250. So basically, it's going to travel a little slower, and it's take a little longer to start up. You see there's a little more of a charge time, and it's a little bit slower on the path than it used to be. All right, coming down to our boy Brawl. This is a tough one to look at, I'm not going to lie. If you're a Brawl player. If you're not a Brawl player, it's probably really good to look at. Passive is more easily identifiable. RMB quality of life changes, increased cast time and execution slam and threshold decreased, shift cooldown increased, Q cooldown increased, impulse force decreased, and level 4 upgrade reduced cooldown refund. It's a nerf. It's a big nerf. And in this little blurb, it says, still does a lot of damage and is moving all over the place. We talked about the movement changes above, so keep everything we talked about in context here, guys, all the movement changes and the logic behind it, because it's important, especially with these Brawl changes. But to especially call out the wind down frames, we understand especially going from super mobile Brawl to this version might feel more restrictive, but we have to start clamping down on free movement to get to a more balanced world. Context on the RMB change, it's an experiment where the spell is slower and heavier but easier to aim. hopefully makes him feel more rewarding for landing it while being clearer to enemies. So let's take a look at all of the details here. So starting off with Brall's Flame Step Shift and Adaptive Strike RMB Dash now have wind down frames where Brall can't immediately enter a glider state to preserve extreme forward momentum. So one of the really cool things you could do on Brall before is off of this charge, and I like show this in my Brall guide, you can, and this used to have yaw restriction too, we can see that doesn't now, so we can kind of swing this. Used to be able to not be able to turn that fast, so we are kind of unlocked on the aiming side of things, but now we are not going to be able to glide. You can see I pressed my glider right there, and I literally just didn't glide because we are sort of locked out of the glider window. So I'm going to try to just spam glide here and show you how soon we could pull it out. Yeah, that was kind of, you saw where it came out there, kind of as I was just like smashing the button. So we try to actually move off of this like we used to. Like, it's still there, but it's not quite as crazy as it was. So you definitely can still move with it, but you're not going to be able to sort of insta-catch that momentum like right out of this very first part. You got to kind of like let it travel and then glide. Now, much kind of worse feeling than that, in my opinion, is that same exact restriction, the lockout of the ability to glide on the shift. So we used to be able to do that same thing on shift. You can see I did it right there. That's basically as soon as you're going to be able to do it. You used to be able to glide right there. Like I pressed it instantly after I dashed. And you used to be able to basically catch the full impulse, the full momentum of that forward dash into the glide, and it would carry you exceptionally far. And what you could do, like what you saw a lot of good Brall players, is basically doing that in repetition, where if you had all 3 dash charges, you could basically do this, glide, and then land Bhop, do it again, glide, land Bhop, do it again, glide. And in like one kind of round of glider fuel, you could actually get so much distance compared to other hunters. And this was in a world where Brall's 3 dash charges were all on the same cooldown, which are all split out now as well. So if we're looking to do that still, like we saw, you can still glide after it, but it's not nearly, here, I'll try to like spam it again. It's not nearly as like fast as it used to be. So you saw like as soon as it came out there, is like basically as soon as you can do it. Yeah. So you can definitely like still do it and like accomplish decent momentum out of it, but you saw at the end I missed it right there. You gotta like be kind of precise on the timing, and it's sort of, if you're continuing your Brall arc, it's a new timing you're gonna want to learn, is how long do I actually have to wait after my dash to be able to glide, right? They made some visual changes to Blazing Spirit, and so we can see once we got this baby charged up, it's going to look different. It's going to be like a much more visually clear in that he's going to literally be on fire. And this is your little charge bar down here, your passive Blazing Spirit that builds. And this got changed. If you haven't played in a minute, this got adjusted to where it's going to give you a lot less it's going to be harder to build up than it used to be. You're going to need more of it. Another really good way, especially on creeps, you'll notice I'm just whacking these creeps. It goes up like way slower than it used to. The main way you want to get it now is through the staggers, and there's stagger changes in this patch where these staggers even happen more often. But if you see this on Brall, all you want to do is shift into it, and that's going to give you literal half of your Raging Spirit bar. And if you do it again, like you're going to be instantly to full. So if you're looking to get to full spirit on Brall and you find a big creep and you just get 2 shift kind of resets there on him. We also got this flame visual down here that I just noticed. That's what's going to let you kind of get to full spirit from PvE very quickly versus what you used to be able to do just like smashing all the creeps. Okay, if we look at RMB Adaptive Strike, cast time increased by 0.2 seconds. So if we do this, we can see it's a little longer before he like brings the slam down. A little bit of a trade-off there is we can now free aim it. And so before you were restricted in your yaw and how far you could turn that once you started the animation, now you kind of have a little, it's definitely like a little more skill expressive, the RMB. You're not kind of locked into that, but a time when you are locked into it is when you shift. And so if you shift your RMB forward, you are going to get yaw locked a little bit. So if you basically like, are trying to close the gap on someone with the shift RMB, just know that you're not going to have that kind of free swing momentum, you're going to have a little bit of yaw lock where you want this to be pretty lined up because you're not going to be able to move it that far once you initiate the dash. It also has this icon over our head, similar to like the void stun, where people actually know it's like about to happen. Again, playing into like the windowing they've been talking about, you know, in theme with all these changes. It now displays separate cast bars for the hold versus the slam. We can see this like double cast bar like kind of come up on the hold there, where there's like the initial charge of how soon you can do it, and then there's like the charge that determines how far you're going to ship it. So like if I let it go there, it'll do that, but if you hold it down all the way, you'll kind of, or if you do that second charge bar, you'll kind of achieve full distance out of it, right? And then the multiplier on the execution damage on this has been reduced from 2 to 1.5 times, and the execution threshold, which is when that 1.5 damage kicks into play, is now 35% down from the 45% it was. So the window in which the execution damage of the RMB comes online is smaller. It's 10% basically lower. You have to have their health pool to bring on this multiplier, and the multiplier is a bit reduced as well. We looked at how Flame Step like changed with the glider. Here we can see they're basically like more normalizing the cooldown reduction. So at max level, like rank 4 of your Flame Step, going to be the same 6-second cooldown, but you're going to have much bigger cooldowns on the journey to level 4. You're not going to be able to instantly get that same 6-second cooldown at 2 like it was before, and this looks like it almost just wasn't changed from when they implemented 4 levels. And so this is like, I think, more of just like a realistic look and like more in line with how you would expect, you know, the cooldown to scale as you leveled it. It's sort of weird that it would be max out at level 2, right? And we just looked at this, casting RMB and then using Flame Step has this like yaw restriction, and so you're not going to be able to, this flick we were talking about, you're not going to be able to basically do that if you've initiated a dash. We can see there, you can only get, you know, a bit of distance out of it. Let's see kind of how much we could get. I mean, you can still turn it pretty good. Like if you mess up, you can still kind of like flick it behind you. It depends on, you know, kind of probably where you're at in your dash too. And then take a look at the Q, which got hit probably the hardest out of everything. Impulse force decreased. So we lost what? That's 250 off of like the momentum number for that's like the actual pull force of that. See how, like, if you've been playing Brawl, you kind of saw that's maybe a little slower than you're used to seeing him get flinged. Something you'll see a lot of the top Brawls do is this aiming thing, where if you aim this way, I'm not super great at it, but like if you watch like a lemur like Nidhogg do this, if you aim, Clap's actually pretty good at it too. If you sort of aim in that, like in a vector toward where you're gonna fling, you can actually get more of that momentum out of the pull. The cooldown's been sort of increased across the board, where even at max level, it's going to have 2 seconds more on the cooldown than it was before. So here's the old numbers. Here's the new numbers for the cooldown on our Q. The level 4 upgrade now only refunds 33% of the remaining cooldown if you hit an enemy instead of half. So slight reduction there. Tether now breaks if Brawl is stunned, which is a new one. And then Tether cannot be activated when Brawl is rooted or grounded. And so I think this probably should have been true the whole time. Maybe this one too. But basically, you're now going to be much more punished if you get crowd controlled while you're in your tether, whereas before you kind of just yank yourself out of that if you had your tether out. So basically, like, going to be more ability for people to outplay your tether. All that being said, guys, if you are a Brawl main and if you can get over the fact that you can no longer do your instant shift glide, you can still do it. It's just not going to feel quite as good. You know, he's still very strong. Like, I've still seen, you know, Brawls absolutely destroying. But basically, when we look at the collective changes in total, it's a huge hit to his, especially if you consider the changes that happened 2 weeks ago and the changes that happened 2 weeks ago for that. There is a huge amount of decrease in the how crazy you can be with his Q. And the other thing that happened a couple weeks ago, if you didn't catch it, is that you can no longer buffer the Q cooldown. So before, you could throw the Q out, the cooldown would start now, and you could hold it for the duration. You could pull at the end and almost have like another instant tether up. You can no longer do that, where you can see when I throw it, the cooldown doesn't start. and I actually have to pull and use it for the cooldown to begin. But basically all these things together trying to make Brawl like less of a crazy oppressive force to play against, because I'm a huge Brawl fan, but I've also been on the other side of Brawl many times, and I can say he is certainly one of the most oppressive hunters to play against. And in certain situations it almost feels, especially if you're against a very skilled Brawl, kind of the depth of his kit and how much he can do and the amount of self-healing he gets back, you know, in certain situations can feel almost unwinnable. But I do think like the depth of his kit and kind of what he can do does make him one of the most interesting, like most fun to play characters in the game. And so we need to basically, you know, all be working together to find a balanced state where he's not only fun for everyone to play and has a really high skill ceiling and stuff, but is also not going to be literally making people quit the game, right? Coming down to our ghost change, we have a new upgrade on our shift combat slide, and this is basically completely unnecessary. You should really never take this one because you're not going to really need it. Because on ghost, what you can do with your left shift, and this is basically the way you want to use left shift the majority of the time, is you have a longer cooldown if you use it, like if you do the full slide, right? So check it out. If I tap it, I have this short cooldown, and it's like, what, 4 seconds? But if I hold it, it has this longer cooldown, right? And there's basically a scale in there where, depending on how long you hold it, you can kind of get it anywhere in that range. So if we take this to level 4, and we do that, you know, we have this move speed buff at the end, and it's like a pretty fast, you know, move speed buff. We also get the same buff out of the short shift, so it definitely could be useful. But in general, in my opinion, the full upgraded railgun is so good on ghost, or, you know, depending on how you're trying to play him and the situation, spike grenade can also be very good. But I'm a huge fan of the cooldown on the railgun, especially like as you move to later game, like final circles, just starts feeling like so good, especially if you're building like any kind of tech item. But basically, like, these two are so strong that you're going to want a really good reason to use this one, and I'm going to give you a really good reason to not, which is basically whenever you're doing stuff on ghost, you want to basically always move like this. And you can see by the time I land, that move speed buff is basically gone. If you're doing like schmove tech properly on ghost, you can, and basically what I'm doing is I'm doing a short cooldown, meaning I'm not doing a long dash hold, because I'm jumping the end of the dash. So you basically can get the short dash cooldown, but you can actually achieve more distance than the long dash from the short dash cooldown if you just hop at the end. So this is like super integral ghost mechanic, where if you're not doing this, you're missing out on a huge amount of mobility playing ghost. And this, even without this upgrade, makes ghost one of the most mobile characters in the game, because you can basically constantly be covering very large amount of ground from like a very low cooldown dash. And, you know, you can also glide out of this. So having this, like, you know, shift jump down as like an integral part of your ghost movement is very important. And once you get kind of like good at that and comfortable with it, you're going to basically, you know, by the time you land, your buff is already gone. Like your speed buff is already gone, right? Because you're basically going to be in the air like while you have that speed buff, and it's basically going to run out, you know, essentially right as you're hitting the ground. All right, coming down to our boy Kingpin. We're keeping an eye on Kingpin, but for now just trying to curb his more extreme combos. So the shift level 4 attack speed has been reduced. So before, if we look at the level 4 upgrade of shift for Kingpin, it is this essentially like reset now, cooldown reduction. It used to be kind of like a full reset on his LMB, his scattergun. So reset LMB bloom, empowered LMBs reduce dash CD by some amount of time per pellet hit. And that was basically letting KP get these like crazy, you know, this crazy burst off of his dash combos where, you know, when you're doing this shift, it's going to reset the LMB bloom, and then hitting the LMB reduces the shift cooldown. So the combo of like the spam shift LMB and that, like when you're hitting targets, that resetting the shift cooldown and getting to like basically continue to just like shift spam, especially with certain item builds, have been like really oppressive apparently. And so there's that change coming through for the level 4 shift. And then we also have, and this is like, you know, kind of a nerf in general, but we also have this sort of yaw restriction on the Q slam. So, you know, one of Kingpin's like huge combos basically just being like flying it out of nowhere and slamming someone, right? Before you had basically full freedom to just do what we were doing on Brawl's R&B, like wing it around, right? But now you're going to basically be yaw, like restricted in that yaw. So you're going to kind of want to have it lined up pre-dash because you're not going to be able to turn it like nearly as much as you used to be able to. So like, you know, let's say someone's here and they like shift like this way and I'm trying to like slam them. You know, you can still move it a bit, but you can't like do a full 180 or like can't like shift this way and just like instantly wing it back and hit someone behind you. You know, you basically have to be a little more anticipatory of where you're going to be like moving the trajectory. And the idea is that that window gives the opponent at least some amount of measure to like react and outplay, you know, rather than it just being, especially if your reaction time's good on Kingpin, as long as you're able to dash in range of someone, you know, before without the yaw lock, you could have a guaranteed slam if your hands were good enough. And so now this is just like, and that could happen from off screen sometimes, you know, from a bush. Like Kingpin can really fly in out of nowhere if you're not ready for it. And so, you know, basically another thing in line with this like windowing idea they're talking about, giving people actually some amount of measure of counterplay. Kingpin doesn't care about counterplay though. He's just going to murk everyone. And so I think he's still going to be just fine. All right, now coming down to the Jin changes, this is sort of framed as an adjustment, but it's definitely like a little more on the nerf side of things. So we look at it, LMB damage reduced, Q death blow damage increased, and execution damage scaling decreased though, R cooldown increased. So it says, we felt like Jin did too much damage with his LMBs when sticking on targets and had access to his ultimate too frequently. We still want him to fulfill his role as an assassin, so we've adjusted his Q to be slightly more consistent. So when we look at the total changes, basically what this is, it's a 20% damage reduction on the LMB, and 20% is a big number. And so if you're a Jin main, you're going to be getting a good bit less value out of this than you were before, like damage-wise, right? And this is the three, you know, you have the tap, you have the charge, and then you have the full, you know, kind of combo where you can kick for the second one, then you can do this little AoE spin slash. So the damage on like every form of that has basically been reduced by 20%. And then looking at flip slash death blow, red decals now display on both spells to better communicate hitboxes. Death blow base damage increased, so we have pretty significant base damage increase on death blow. Look at the top end, 126 up from 90. And then the AP ratio scaling increased from these numbers up to these numbers. So an extra 15% AP scaling as well to top rank. So significant damage boost there. However, death blow execution damage scaling has been reduced. And so we can see the kind of difference in the scaling windows of the execution damage. And these windows are basically scaling from 0 up to like 80% missing health, like 0 it being like the most damage, 80% being like the least amount of this extra damage. So basically he got like a narrowing and reduction of the not a narrowing, more just like a numbers reduction on the execution range. And so basically like their summary here is death blow should do more damage than before until around the 60% health mark. And then these execution changes come into play. And so under 60% health, death blow is slightly nerfed about 5% to enemies below that number. So basically it's going to do less. It's going to do around 5% less damage than before. If they're under 60% health, it's going to do more damage if they're above 60% health. So kind of like pulling some of that damage out of the execution side of it and putting it on like the front end. And then we also basically just have a 5-second increase to our clone cooldown across the board at every level we can see here. It's actually not in the patch notes here, but he has the same restriction on gliding after the dash, just like we were talking about with Brall. We can no longer, I tried to glide right there, so I'm going to spam glide here. That's like as soon as we can glide after the dash. We can no longer insta catch, you know, the dash. And just like Brall, you know, you can still kind of do it, but it's not like the level it was at where you could catch. I think Jin's is even a little worse than Brall, if I'm being honest, as far as how soon you can actually catch it. Like, it feels pretty bad. There we go. That was probably, like, the soonest you could catch it. But it's not going to be able to grab that huge first part of the initial momentum. Coming down to Joule, this is a big one. I got a couple friends that are, like, kind of triggered about this, but hopefully people will start to understand. And all this is testing, guys, remember. So if you're a Joule main and you're frustrated by this, definitely give your feedback to Theorycraft. Let them know how it feels. But basically, they're in this line of thought to try to add windowing or some measure of outplay, they're adding a cooldown reduction to Joule's R&B orb reset. So we see R&B Lightning Orb now spawns after a delay, shift explosion radius reduced, R cast time increased. So Joule Nerf across the board. Previously, Joule could snapcast her R&B and dash through it immediately, knowing that it would give her a reset. So what they mean by this is basically, if you're on Joule, your R&B is your spear, your voltaic spear. You see her charge up this thing. When you hit that, not only is it going to add the, some of the marks you need to proc your static charge, which is the thing that does the big damage and resets your shift. If you hit an enemy hunter with this, it's actually going to spawn a lightning orb, and it's going to be this little orb on the ground, and that orb will reset the cooldown of your dash. So what they mean by snapcast basically is if you knew you were going to hit this before, you could essentially, without the orb even being there yet, you could preload your shift knowing that the orb is going to pop there and like basically instantly get it, like without maybe a second for your opponent to even understand what's happening or react. And remember your iframe during that whole dash, and it just reset your dash, so you have another dash after that. And if you understand how to weave the LMB autos, it's very likely that you're able to have at least one, if not both of those, be fully stacked shifts. And so it just is like a kind of crazy amount of damage that feels like there's very little outplay. So they're trying to add some window of outplay to the R&B. So like if we go look at the bot here, and I throw it, oh, she doesn't actually spawn one, so I'm actually not going to be able to really demonstrate this. But basically normally an orb would spawn there, like if that's an enemy hunter, right? And off of that, R&B, you could sort of preload your Q knowing that you're going to get an orb reset, and then have that lead into an instant second dash after that. So it's going to be a half second now. When that orb drops out, after you throw your spear, you have to wait at least something like that long, instead of, basically what they're saying, snap casting it. And the whole idea being, there's sort of some amount of measure of window for the opponent to have at least some element of outplay. And that's reflected in their wording. It says this change means that she'll have to pause before committing. We know adding more windows to someone as lightning fast as Joule may feel disruptive, but as we've said before, we need to start clamping down on these unreactable, hyperfast actions to get to a readable, balanced game state. And look, like what I was saying, guys, look at this note. The 0.5 seconds value is just what they're starting with. We want Joule to still feel like lightning, but we also want to feel like there's a breath for other players to react. This is what we're looking to tune, so tell us how you feel. So if you're a Joule main, definitely leave your feedback in the Discord. Let them know what you think about these changes and kind of how they feel in general. And then coming down to the shift, we basically have a 40 decrease on the radius. So see the little thing at the end of the shift? Basically that is slightly smaller than it used to be, that little explosion right there. And then we also have an increase on the cast of the ult, and then there's also a landing indicator. So it's the numbers aren't huge, but it's double the amount of cast time. So she's not going to be able to quite as reliably iframe with the ult, where she just instas out of any damage or anything. There's going to be a slight, it's literally a third of a second, slightly less than a third of a second amount of pause before you're able to launch into the air. And then now when you're coming down, there's going to be some visual indicator like that we saw. So the opponent will actually see that circle and will actually have a split second to react. They'll know, hey, Joule's coming to smash down on me. And if your opponent doesn't have a shift, you're definitely still going to be able to hit that. But basically this lets, if your opponent is does still have shift charges up, they likely will be able, if they're paying attention, to at least try to dash out of that. Coming down to Oath, shift reduced hyper mobility. So I'm just going to read this. We'll keep saying this. We know having cool mechanical optimizations for hyper mobility is fun, but it sets the stage for a mobility arms race where everyone needs to either be able to react to lightning fast engagements or have ones of their own. And so this is basically a starting point for them, where for now they are going to be removing your ability on Oath to do the LMB charge and carry. Basically what people were doing is from this swing, right? It's this charge swing. See how my body goes forward a bit? There's a bit of this forward momentum. So what you could basically do is if you did this in the air, you could catch that momentum in your glider, and then you could hop. So then you're gliding, right? Then you could hop the end of that while you're charging your next one. And you could essentially have this sort of infinite movement loop where you're doing that, catching the momentum in your glide, then B-hopping as you're charging your next one. And then that sends you right into your next, glide, B-hop, like that. But you can see it's very much reduced the ability to glide after the LMB. So I'm going to spam it here. Yeah, I can't even... You literally can't even get... If you jump and let your LMB go, you cannot get a glide out fast enough before you hit the ground, in fact. So... but if we're looking over the air here, that's about as soon as you can glide after it. Here, I'll just try spamming it again. Yeah. So it's a significant window, and also it seems like even the kind of momentum we even get out of this LMB is like even a bit down, right? Where I think maybe that was part of these changes as well. And this is true not only for the LMB, but also for the shift, where it's the same exact idea on the Brawl shift and the Jin shift we were looking at, where you used to be able to catch the momentum from the shift. You can no longer do that. And I think, personally, I don't think that's fair. I think Oath should have that one. Just take the kind of niche, you know, like Bhop thing away. That's, you know, I think that might be fair because he's already super loaded in his kit, and that just makes him like one of the most mobile hunters in the game on top of everything he already has. But I think he should still be able to glide after his shift, because like literally every hunter can do that. And there's no, if you already took this LMB thing out, there's nothing else that's making Oath like super oppressive mobility wise. So why can't he shift glide just like everyone else now? So I think that's a little too much. I would like to see this last change on Oath actually get turned back. But I don't know if we're going to see the LMB, this thing, get added back in it ever, because of kind of how much mobility you could get out of it, right? If they do introduce it back, it'll be something like the Zeph Bhop, where it's got some kind of like dampening effect on it. All right, taking a look at our girl Shrike. Actually, like, I'm a big fan of these Shrike changes, honestly. These are like some well-needed buffs to our sniper hunter here. LMB, increased rate of fire. Q, picking up ward makes you vulnerable, and ward health doubled. So bug fix where your shift would sometimes get overwritten when trying to bunny hop. That got fixed. On our rifle, we have a cooldown reduction on the actual shot timing. So this is like our fire rate. So we actually have 0.2 seconds off of, you know, this cooldown before we can shoot again. And so that's like a pretty big, you know, change when you consider the kind of the rhythm of her and the overall DPS. You're actually going to be able to shoot a little bit faster now. And now proccing your Raptor's Mark can now stagger monsters. So what we were talking about with Brawl on the creeps, where if they have that circle under them, now if you have your Raptor Mark on them and you proc it with a second shot, her passive, right, you are going to actually be able to get that stagger through. It's going to count as an ability. And then it just says RMB should feel better to use. So we're not sure. If you're a Shrike main, you might know what changed about this, but I'm not totally sure what exactly changed with the RMB, other than it now feels better to use. I guess it does feel a little better to use. Maybe it's coming out a little faster. Maybe there's not as much cooldown, or not as much slowing effect on Shrike when you throw it. But it does feel pretty good to throw. All right, very last hunter, coming down to Void. Pretty minor change here. Basically just this change to Gravity Orb, where on Void before, he has this thing with the interaction with his LMB, where... See how it's this long aiming laser? That's he's in an empowered one. As soon as you shoot, it's unempowered. But if you wait this little cooldown, it'll like become empowered again. So if you just spam, you're at these unempowered ones, right? And then it goes this longer one. So before, basically, the longer you waited, like, so let's say I had these weaker ones. If I waited, you know, multiple seconds, this LMB was going to be stronger than if I had just shot one immediately following. Like if I did a big one there. Basically, there used to be like some time scaling between when the last time you autoed to scale the damage of the empowered LMB. Now it's not like that. It's literally, if you have the empowered LMB, it's on and it's the same damage. If you don't have the empowered LMB, it's off and not that damage. It's the shorter damage, right? And the other important change they implemented with Void, if you missed it, if you haven't played it in a minute, is that the unempowered LMB no longer goes through walls. You have to actually wait the half second for the empowered one, and this is not only going to have the longer range, it's also going to have the wall shot, right? So as a Void player, definitely want to be getting used to, you know, the empowered LMB timing. All right, finally coming down to consumables, we have price adjustments with the whole, you know, new gold thing going on in the system changes, but we also have some new consumables, which is pretty cool. We now have an elixir of health, an elixir of mana, an elixir of speed, along with this thing called SUPERVIVE. And so these are basically going to be effects over time, from what I can tell. So if we look at like what an elixir of health looks like, consume to regenerate health out of combat for 90 seconds, mana out of combat for 90 seconds, move speed out of combat for 90 seconds. So elixir of speed could prove very valuable. And we take a look at SUPERVIVE. Drink to fully restore health, mana, armor, and cooldowns. You're vulnerable while drinking. So this is literally a full fight reset, including things like all your cooldowns and your ultimate. And so basically a juiced up version of the normal Hypervive, which already restores your health and mana. You're now just getting armor and cooldowns on the top of that. In the in-game shop, there's also going to be a deployable base available now for 5,000 gold. So if you want a mobile shop that you can drop, especially moving into endgame, you're going to be looking to pick up at least one of these deployable base camps. And then you're also going to be able to still buy a respawn beacon, which is 8,000 gold in the shop. And we can see packing up base camp now is a little cheaper than it was before. So it's only going to be 800 coin to pack this baby up. So if you are able to acquire a base camp early, if you're going to be moving, if that's going to be out of the circle as you're kind of moving toward wherever the end circle is, you really want to consider, do I have 800 coin to pick up that base camp so I can have a place to buy potions, upgrade my weapons, buy new armor, anything I'm going to need, moving into the deeper part of the game. Coming down to our last kind of big chunk of changes here, power changes. So we have changes on Abyssal Eye to where now kind of this effect that's always been there, giving you this kaiju vision of where people are at on the map is now going to also let you see invisible units, but it's only going to be through your vision cone. We have the cooldown on Blinkstone increase from 12.5 seconds to 20 seconds. I think that's very fair. I think 12.5 seconds is an insanely short cooldown to have on Blinkstone to begin with. I think 20 seconds is a short cooldown, so I don't think that one's going to be too painful. Delicate Barrier had an interesting touch where the damage reduction, so this is basically when you're at full health, you take less damage, right? So that the lingering duration of that buff when you get hit is now doubled, so it's going to last for a second instead of half a second, that damage reduction, but the damage reduction itself is reduced from 50 to 30, and so basically you're going to get that damage reduction for double the amount of time, but it's going to be 20% down. Final changes to consumables, we have scan grenades now having a increased cast range, so you're gonna be able to throw them from farther away, and they can now be picked up off the ground. Like a Bebo bomb, like a Shrike bird, you can now walk up to your scan grenades, interact with them, and grab them and go use them again later. I think this is a really cool change. Coming down to the map changes, we looked at this briefly at the beginning, but this is just, very cool visual update to Ion Acres and Site 38. It feels really like unique in there to fight now. It's now like a very kind of has its own personality on the map. And same thing with this new area they've added called Fortress, which is like mid-left of the map over in Chaos Steppes. Really cool area. I had like 1 or 2 endgame circles there yesterday, and it's like, kind of a whole new area to kind of fight and play around in. Coming down to details on client changes, the biggest one is this ability to just launch into practice while in queue. So at any time, once you've already queued, there's going to be a big button, both like if you're in the game spectating and out of game in the top left, where you can just hit go to practice, and it'll drop you right into practice tool while you're queued. And so just, a really good way to get in here, stay, warmed up, get your combat reps in, work on your combos, work on your movement, any kind of mechanical stuff you're doing, instead of having to just watch other people have fun. You can start getting a little bit of extra practice in between games. And if you watch some of the best players in the game, someone like Lemur, was doing this before this was an option. After almost every queue, he drops out, comes into practice tool, re-queues, and is constantly in here messing with stuff, working with stuff. And that's one of the reasons why he is one of the best players. He's been doing that for years. They've also added the ability when you're in a custom game to disable Resurgence, the day 1 revival rules, which is a pretty interesting change and some interesting implications for high elo play, being able to basically toggle that off. And then they also updated the tutorial, removing some parts that are no longer accurate based on all the crazy amount of changes that have been happening over the last few months, I'm assuming. Onto team communications and coordination. I really like this change. They basically added 3 more pings into the lineup to help the enriched ping system and let you non-verbally communicate what you're trying to do to your team. And something they added last patch, if you don't know this, every player by default, like right at the beginning of your hunter's journey, you're going to unlock the thumbs up and the thumbs down emotes. Those now have VO associated with them. So if you're looking to respond to these pings, if you add the thumbs up or the thumbs down to your emote wheel, you're going to be able to basically say, if someone pings, let's go here. If you thumbs down, you can say no, or you can say yes, and your hunter will be like yes or no, and they'll hear it, rather than you have to stop and type. So I think, if you're looking to communicate, or if you're, a player that doesn't like voice comms, or you're playing muted or whatever, consider adding thumbs up and thumbs down emotes to your emote bar, to your emote wheel, so you can respond to pings. You can not only do, the pings yourself, you can now also kind of try to respond to pings with a yes or no, or a. And then there's this really cool change that they've added with ally camera. So now in game, it's probably not going to work in practice because I don't have teammates. But if you hit F2, F3, or F4, it's going to take a half second to dim your screen, and then it's going to pan in onto, it's going to like show the player that whoever's that hotkey is associated with. So I'm assuming if you look at the like list of the players on the left, probably the highest player is F2, the next one's F3, and the next one's F4, if I had to imagine, you know, kind of how it was coded. So, you know, if you're looking to find your teammates or see what they're doing, you're going to be able to actually do that while you're alive now. And then the other reason this is going to be really useful is if an ally is dead and you do this to them, it's going to try to show their death box. And so if you're looking to find an ally's death box, you can't find where it is, which happens to me quite often. Hopefully this kind of, you know, keybind will let you at least get an idea of the area that it's in, right? We also have these minor VO updates. So we have basically when there's 3 and 4 squads left, we're going to get an announcement now too, because before it was just when there's 5 squads left, they said half squads remaining. And then she said something when it was final 2, but now you're going to know from some VO when it goes down to 4 from 5, and when it goes down to 3 from 4, and then when it finally goes down to 2 with that normal, you know, last squads remaining announcement. And then they also increase the cooldown of like the Hunter's VO across the board so that they kind of say their voice lines in general less often. We also have, I think, much requested. I've seen this request, you know, over the months, a decent bit. Some added controller support, very new, very experimental here. We can see experimental controller support, very experimental, in fact. Try at your own discretion, but maybe try in practice mode first. And so I'm going to be messing around with this a bit myself later on, as soon as I have some time. But yeah, you can kind of see the control scheme here. If you have a controller and want to test this stuff out, I'm sure they're looking for feedback, and that's true for all the stuff in here. So make sure to be, you know, sending your feedback to Theorycraft through the survey, through Discord, to make sure they kind of know how you're feeling about all these changes once you've got a chance to play yourself, you know, how they're feeling and that kind of stuff. And then they have these known issues where the controller is known not to work in the following areas: out of game, drop phase, when interacting with the shop UI or death boxes, and when interacting with other HUD elements. So if you are going to use controller, maybe keep your keyboard around as backup if you need to do any of these things. And then coming down to these updates to the mission hub, which I can just kind of show you guys in game here, they're basically saying they want to add, you know, more compelling tracks of progression, not only for players that are interested in ranked, but for players that are more interested in the hunter's journey, more interested in mastery, hunter mastery, more interested in the battle pass, you know, and that kind of being the core of their progression experience instead of like grinding ranked points. And that's a significant amount of players. And, you know, as the player base grows, that will become more and more amount of players. So daily and weekly missions are one of the biggest sources of XP. And while they've had a missions tab, it was like somewhere up here, sort of obscure. It was hard to notice, and most players never really realized that they were even there, which is pretty true. So they created a new missions hub that highlights the missions available to you and should make it easier for you to identify things to do to level up faster. So new mission hub added to the lobby, which is right here. When you have new missions, it will light up with a notification, which will, you know, it'll like be glowing, and then you can click on it. And then when missions are complete, go back to the hub after your game to claim your reward. So you actually, when you go in here and complete any of these, you have to go in and like actually, you know, like once you place all your deployable fans, you have to come in here and actually like claim this reward, and then you're going to get the XP and the titles. And you know, these have like multiple levels that is kind of hidden in this new window, but like you see there's 4 out of 15 levels here. Once I place 10 deployable fans, like this is going to jump to where now I have to place like 20 deployable fans. And on this seasonal one, there's basically 3 ranks of each of these. And so you're basically, see how there's 15 quests here and there's 5 of these? You're basically going to have to complete each of these levels like 3 times, and that's going to give you access to every sort of limited time call sign that's included in here. And once you unlock all 15, you get goated Bebo emote. And so I'm going to try to do this. I have obviously not been focusing on this. As you can see, my scoreboard looks pretty terrible. But like yesterday, I completed, it looks like the weekly missions might have reset. So you can basically see, here's the missions that are going to be active today. Here's the missions that I have kind of this week to complete, and it'll show you when it resets with this timer here. Yeah, so this one has reset fairly recently. And then we have the seasonal ones, which is, this is the 3 months that are basically happening with season 1, right? So by the end of the battle pass, we can see here, I think it should show the date ends in 55 days. The 55 days is basically how long you have to complete the seasonal quest in here, right? All right, and coming down to the final bit of changes here, other bug fixes, quality of life. Void has received updated tooltips. Thank you to Omnipresent Oatmeal for that. Fixed an issue where crystals that spawn in the second phase of Biome Soul bosses would fall over and die on their own. Mana Cloud updated with activation visual effects. That actually looks really nice. With Hudson, if you hit an enemy with your ultimate, you're no longer yaw locked to face them. So before, if you landed that chain to try to reel someone in and grind them up, you couldn't like, you know, pivot around because you were kind of locked on them, and now you can. The interact buffer has been increased from 0.2 to 0.5 seconds to make it easier to interact with things like Sniper Ward. And then the two-way tunnels and Bhop Hunter missions, which we were actually just looking at here, in here, the get kills after you exit a two-way tunnel, as well as those Bhop missions are now going to count when you get an assist to fulfill the mission conditions, not just a knock. And thank you to Keldrick Usugi for that one. I think my face might kind of be in the way here, but we can see we have this little like highlight where under the missions, you can now see your current battle pass level. You can see your hunter's journey, and you can also see your mastery with like whatever hunter you have selected. And all these things have their associated rewards with them as well, right? And so actually like a pretty significant amount of progression. Significant amount of progression, you know, kind of being built out beyond just...
No sympathy. No sympathy.
that's a oldie but a goodie. You know, quite a bit of progression being added beyond just the ranked grind and trying to get better, which is really cool, especially when you consider, you know, more casual players. And I, you know, honestly would consider myself a little bit of like more of a casual player. My ranked kind of competitive grind days are done. I've sort of outgrown that a little bit, where this virtual number in a game no longer has bearing on my life and like how I think of myself and such. But you know, it matters to a lot of people, and it used to matter to me like a lot as well. But you know, basically for people like me, or people looking to just like play the game more for fun, or just have a cool experience, get more into like the lore, the story of SUPERVIVE, really like all this new kind of, you know, extra progression getting added to help feel like you're, you know, not only progressing as a player, trying to get better, but also, you know, progressing on all these different fronts to unlock cool exclusive rewards, right? Boom. So that's pretty much it for this one. Again, I just want to say thank you guys so much for everything over the past few months. And this is just such a goated community, and I am so honored to be a part of it. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for all the support, and hopefully we can continue to, you know, just keep pumping and make this one of the, you know, coolest games that we all know that it could be. And so we all just gotta stay positive, keep on that mindset, and keep working toward that. And just go out there and have a good time. This game is so fun. Just go out there, you know, don't worry about your placement, don't worry about your rank, just test the changes, try Crysta, you know, see how you feel about the gold thing, you know, just like have a good time. Go Vive, man. It's so, there's just nothing like this game. I've played so many video games, and nothing gives you the kind of experience and the dopamine hit that this does. And along with these changes, definitely make sure to be sending your feedback to Theorycraft. Join the SUPERVIVE Discord. There's a feedback channel there. You know, the devs look through all that stuff. So definitely be letting them know how you're feeling about these changes once you've had a chance to try them out yourself. And with that, again, I just want to thank you so much for watching and all your support. Remember to take care of yourself and keep vibing. Catch you in the next one. Peace.